Hi, I'm John Ray, and welcome to the Thriving Podcast. I'm your host and intuitive coach, dedicated to amplifying your intuition, transforming your mind, and igniting your inner magic to create a life you're obsessed with. 2 years ago, I was burnt out as fuck in a toxic relationship and a successful tech career that I just wasn't happy in anymore. I left it all behind with no plan, and now I'm running my own business, immersed in purpose and passion, happily married to my soulmate, and living out my dreams every single day. And if you're badass enough to be listening to this podcast, then you're already on the fast track to doing the same, babe. On this podcast, we'll dive into all things life, business, heart, mind, body, and soul, empowering you to up-level your life and embody your happiest, healthiest, and hottest self. It's time to make idealistic your new realistic, because you're not just here to survive, you're here to thrive. Hey fam, welcome back to the podcast. Happy Thriving Thursday. So I was sitting here thinking about what am I going to pre-record these podcast episodes on for the next couple weeks, because I'm going to be on vacation, as you may or may not know, and so I'm not going to be able to record, obviously. So I was like trying to basically, how can I let this be easy? And I had this idea, I might have mentioned this already on the podcast, but I wanted to do like a little series. I was like, let me just do like a little 2-part mini series, a 3-part mini series, and that way I can record it all at once, break it up, and give you like a few shorter episodes that are like all connected, like make it easier for me, give you guys some good value, all good in the hood. But I just wasn't landing on a topic. Like nothing was really coming to me that I felt really called to make a mini series on. So I was just sitting here and then I was like, you know what? I'm just like so tired. I'm just not even gonna think about this anymore. I'll record it Monday, whatever. I was trying to get it all recorded before Sindri gets here tomorrow. Well, for you listening to this, it's going to be, he's already here. But for me right now, it's tomorrow. But I was like, whatever, it's fine. I got to prioritize my energy. Like, I don't like to record when I'm not feeling inspired. I'm not going to force it. I feel like my brain is like dead anyway. I can't think of ideas. I'm just going to go to sleep and like, I'll do it Monday. It'll be fine. Even though he'll be here. And then just all of a sudden out of nowhere, literally right after I said like, you know, I'm too tired. I literally actually audibly said out loud, you know what? I'm too tired to do this. I'm not going to do it. Just popped into my head, just one sentence. Like I almost like audibly heard it. And it was just like, I don't even know where it came from. But it was like, are you burnt out or are you just out of alignment? And I was like, what? And it wasn't speaking to me. Like, I'm not burnt out, right? I don't feel burnt out right now at all. It was like as a title. It was coming through as a title. Like someone else needs to be asked this question, basically. And I don't know, that just came in. And all of a sudden, I just felt this spark of inspiration to record on that. So that's what I'm going to record on. I don't know really where it came from. I mean, I haven't, I guess I kind of do. I do feel like I've been seeing a lot of people talk about burnout recently. I mean, it's kind of a hot topic all the time, I feel like. But I feel like I've also been really deepening my understanding of like how everything works. I mean, like I always am, but like how your body works, how your nervous system works, and like what stress is, and feeling emotions, and realizing that you don't necessarily have to go through these extreme up and downs all the time. If that happens to you, maybe that doesn't happen to you, but that's what has been happening to me for a long time. And I kind of just was like, I thought that was just how it goes. And that's kind of on quantum leaping, not so much burnout, but I feel like basically burnout is what happens when you get stuck in that down period of the quantum leap, if that makes sense. Because obviously we're always going through lessons and we're always getting these triggers, and like the way I kind of like to think about it is something gets initiated, right? Like something gets triggered, your lesson gets initiated basically, right? And so whatever stage of life you're in, whatever you're experiencing, we're always going to be shifting in and out of alignment because we're always growing and changing. And if you're not growing and changing, then it's going to start to shift out of alignment just because you're going to be settling in some way because your intuition is always calling you to grow and change. So it's like, it's impossible to just stay like aligned, living in alignment happily without making changes, right? Because that's the whole goal. Like our purpose here is to just continue to grow and change. So your intuition will always be calling you to follow those. And so the way I kind of look at life is, okay, I'm here, imagine like you're starting at some base level of existence. Your intuition is going to start to call you towards something or away. Your intuition is going to start to call you towards something. You're basically either going to follow that nudge or you're not going to. And if you follow it, then you shift back into alignment. You grow a little bit more, and then you're going to get another one, and so on and so forth. If you don't follow it, then the universe is basically going to start working harder and doing more and getting louder, basically, with what it wants you to do and what it's calling you towards. And it's going to keep giving you more and more signs, and it's going to start intervening more and more until you finally listen to what it's calling you to do, to what your intuition is calling you to do, right? To what your soul is calling you to do, whatever resonates with you. And so to come back to that original question, are you burnt out or are you just super out of alignment? And really, actually what came into my head was, are you burnt out or do you just need to sit with an emotion and then make a change? Like, seriously, because what I've really come to realize is you absolutely don't have to get stuck in that state of chronic stress, which is really misalignment is chronic stress, right? And you're just stuck in that trauma response, essentially. Your body is always trying to get back to homeostasis and trying to regulate, but it's like the more that you ignore your intuition, essentially, the more that you ignore those signs, and the more that you ignore whatever the change is that you're being called to make, because like I said, there almost always will be a change you're being called to make. And like once you really get into it, right, and you're living life and experiencing, you will have these phases of being more aligned, right, depending how connected you are to your intuition and how aligned you are. But you will then always reach a point where it's like, okay, something else is now being initiated, or we're peeling a new layer. So you can't stay stagnant for too long. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, though. And that's kind of really what I'm getting at, is when that initiation happens, is you actually can just listen right away. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to make that transition. The way I kind of look at it is we have this initiation, and then after it's initiated, it's triggered, like your next level is initiated, basically. And that could look like the first little sign, the first little nudge, could come through in many ways. Then we go into this integration period or this embodiment phase where basically it's like, okay, am I going to listen to the nudge or am I not going to? And so if you listen to the nudge right away, that period can be really quick. And yeah, there's going to be fear that comes up because, again, we're growing, we're changing. But if you know how to navigate that fear, and if you're listening to the nudge in the beginning of the phase, the fear is going to be a lot smaller and a lot easier to move through, right? And so it doesn't have to be this thing of like, oh, now I had this trigger of like, I need to make this change, and now I feel I'm stuck because I have to figure out how to move through it. And it feels obvious to me as I'm saying this now, but really the cause in my experience, of getting stuck in those periods was just because I was just not feeling my feelings. I was suppressing my emotions. I made a reel last night I was like, just thinking about the fact that I just like suffered through 10 years of chronic pain, and I bounced between all these different doctors and chiropractors and physical therapists and all these different kinds of healing modalities, and no one ever told me that all I had to do was just start feeling my damn feelings, And it's really just like suppressing those emotions that is causing you to stay stuck in that state of stress. And the thing is, every time you ignore that voice and you deny that nudge and you choose again to deny it, because you're going to keep getting triggers. You get the first nudge, the first trigger. If you ignore it, you're going to get another one. And again, they're going to keep getting louder. And every single time you get that trigger again and you choose to stay the same and not make the change again, you're going to have more stress created in your body. and more emotion come up, because every time you're confronted with that decision, emotion is going to come up around it, right? The fear is going to come up around it. Maybe the frustration or the sadness or the anger around the current situation. You're going to be basically energetically charging the misalignment every time. And because you're not making the change, you're continuing to suppress all of that emotion and all of that energy, which is exacerbating your stress. The more you suppress, the more you stress. And so you're getting more and more out of alignment, because you're getting farther and farther away from that nudge, right? Like if you imagine yourself being in alignment, like you're on an arrow, like a straight line, right? And you get the nudge to like continue along that line. If you don't follow, it's like you just shift a little bit off to the side, but then you don't follow again, right? You ignore it again, you shift a little bit more off the side. So it's like if you visualize, like every time you make that choice to deny your intuition again, and not make that change that you're being called to make, you're taking another step to the side, or you're shifting off to the side even more. And when you end up so far away, that's when where you identify as I'm burnt out. And really you've just been in this state of stress and misalignment for so long. And your nervous system has been out of whack because you don't feel safe, because you're out of alignment and you're suppressing all this fear that needs to be felt and all this emotion that needs to be felt. Oh my God, my hand, I'm like holding my arm out right now because I was doing this visual with my hands, even though I'm not recording a video and you guys can't see. And my hand just started shaking. It's like shaking wildly. I don't know what that was about. That was crazy. It stopped now. All right, some energy moving there. Someone needed to hear that. So to bring a personal example into this, like when I was burnt out, I've been burnt out or identified as burnt out a couple times in my life. And the first time was at my job. And I've talked about this a little bit, like in my story, I talked about being burnt out with my job, my relationship. So I was burnt out in my job and I left my job and I was still burnt out. And I didn't understand, why am I still burnt out? And I thought, oh, well, it just takes time for burnout to heal naturally, you know? And I didn't realize that I was still in a super toxic relationship that was very out of alignment. And I was still continuing to stress and suppress my emotions and deny my intuition. So burnout is really just denying your intuition for a prolonged period of time, which is being in misalignment for a prolonged period of time. And this is the thing, is no matter what I did, as long as I was in those situations, I still felt burnt out, quote unquote. But as soon as I made the change I was being called to make, I was better. So it wasn't actually that I needed this huge, long integration period of being miserable and feeling so burnt out and stressed. I just needed to actually make the change that I was being called to make. It didn't take a long time after I finally left that relationship and then I was out of the relationship and out of the job for me to feel myself again. And like, obviously I still had work to do on tending to my nervous system and getting it back into, into the green, as they say, for like the majority of time. And I'm still working on that. But I wouldn't have identified as burnt out anymore because I wasn't really in that freeze state. Like I think burnout, what we call burnout, it's really just a freeze state or a fight or flight. Like it's basically just a prolonged trauma response. Don't necessarily quote me on that, but I feel pretty confident in what I'm saying is, I think what we identify as burnout is really just a prolonged trauma response that needs to be completed. And it just hasn't been completed because you're not processing the energy, you're not processing the emotion, you're not feeling your feelings, and you're continuing to trigger it over and over again. So your body can never get back to safety. And really, it doesn't take long to complete it if you know how to complete it somatically, right? Like you just need to go into the body, complete that response. And a lot of the time it's going to look like just like letting yourself feel the feelings, letting the energy move through your body. And this is where I will say, I know there is like specific training, like somatics training on how to literally complete a specific trauma response. So depending on like the severity of the trauma and all that I won't confidently speak on, although I am looking into doing an actual training and certification on this because I'm so passionate about it. But I will say that simply acknowledging what you're ignoring and making the change, I believe in most situations, is enough to get out of that state that you're identifying as burnt out. You might still feel really stressed, like I'm not saying you're going to get immediately back to perfect. What I mean by that is like after you make the change and after you listen to your intuition, the stress is lifted and you feel great. But then you may still have other stressors in your life you need to address, like it might be a little bit of a journey, but that weight will be lifted. And that feeling of burnt out, I think, is really just you're carrying that weight of denying your intuition and ignoring your intuition. So if you feel burnt out, yeah, I'd really invite the question, am I really burnt out, or am I just ignoring something that I know to be true and not making the change that I need to make to align to that truth? And I'm willing to bet that if you make that change, make that choice, and take that action that is driven from that truth that you're ignoring and denying, you will feel a lot better. And honestly, if you want me to be really, really honest, I would apply this to other things. Am I really depressed, or am I just not feeling my feelings and denying my intuition? Do I really have anxiety, or am I just not feeling my feelings and denying my intuition? Like everyone has anxiety, like when you say like I have anxiety, like I'm diagnosed or whatever, like it's literally called generalized anxiety disorder. Like it's general anxiety, which that basically is just like you're just very much in that emotional home of fear. If you start connecting to your intuition, listening to your intuition more, you're not going to be in a constant state of fear because you're going to be aligned with love. And again, I'm not saying that it's a quick fix or like an instant fix, right? There are no quick fixes. But what I am saying is don't underestimate the power of simply making a change that is aligned with your truth that you're feeling called to make, and the power of actually allowing your emotions to be felt and being present with them. Because the crazy thing is, no matter what's going on in the bigger picture, we are only ever in the present moment. And if you allow yourself to feel that anxiety, that stress, whatever it is in the present moment, and to come into a state of peace and safety and regulation, and allow yourself to feel love and connect to your intuition in the present moment, you feel at peace in the present moment. If you have the ability to feel at peace and to feel that love in that moment, you have the ability to feel it all the time. It's just a matter of actually learning how to integrate that and embody that moment to moment. So am I really burnt out, or am I just denying my intuition, not feeling feelings, not making a change, ignoring what I know to be true, and not aligning to that truth? Am I really burnt out, or does my body just not feel safe because I'm stuck in this chronic state of stress because I'm denying my intuition? I'm extremely dysregulated. Burnout is just described as like extreme depletion and exhaustion, depression. That's literally just what happens when you don't complete those responses and you're constantly working against your nervous system's ability to regulate and attempts to regulate. I've had periods since I started my business as well where I've thought that I burned myself out and I was burnt out. And I thought that I needed to take as much time off as the time that I spent, quote unquote, burning myself out. Oh, I've been working so hard for a month. Like I need to take a big long vacation, a big long break. And the reason I thought that, again, that I needed to bounce between these extremes was because I didn't actually realize what was causing the burnout. So it's just like, okay, let me give myself as much of a break as possible so I can try to like recoup all of this energy to go back into that space again, in that state, and like acting the same way. But when I actually made the changes that I was being called to make, which was really changing the energy and the intention that I brought into my work and how I approached my work, and denying my intuition by not setting boundaries, by saying yes to things that weren't actually a full body yes to me. If you're feeling burnt out from work, it's probably not because you're working too much. It's because you're working too much on work that you don't want to do, on work that is not a full body yes. Or you're not setting boundaries and you're working outside of what is a full body yes to you in terms of boundaries and time and energy allocation. You're saying yes to things that are actually a no. Because the thing is, your intuition is never going to lead you to burnout. Like, your intuition is never going to say yes to something that is going to drain your energy. So if your energy is being drained, it's simply because you're denying your intuition. And on that note of energy and intention, like burnout and that denial of your intuition, that can happen just simply from shaming yourself, right? It can be caused simply just from within, like you can burn yourself out by just living in an emotional home of fear or shame or guilt, right? Like whatever you're carrying. And that's where, if you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed all the time, the change you need to make, it might be tangible, it might be energetic, like it might be external, it might be internal. So I feel that's important to mention too, because the change is not always external necessarily, because you could be feeling very overwhelmed and have actually not a lot on your plate, and it could just be coming from this internal feeling of just like feeling behind and having a ton of pressure on yourself. Or you could be feeling guilty about something that you need to just forgive yourself for. And there might not even be an actual conversation you need to have or a change you need to make in the 3D. It could be just internal. So it's really just all about, again, like, because your intuition is not going to be calling you to shame or guilt. It's going to be calling you to love and forgiveness. I feel like when you say, I'm so burnt out on this, like I'm so burnt out from this relationship, or I'm so burnt out on this relationship, or I'm burnt out on this job, or burned out, however you would say it, it really just means, like, this is not aligned for me anymore, but I'm still staying in it. Like, it just means it's not aligned and I need to leave. I don't want this anymore. That's basically what that means. I don't want this. It doesn't have to necessarily mean I don't want this at all, but it means I don't want this the way that it is. I need to make a change. That's all it means. I need to make some change to shift it back into alignment. And I'm trying to think of an example. If there's a situation where this wouldn't be the case, or another way that I need to explain this, but I feel like it's really that simple. Follow your intuition, feel your feelings, don't suppress your emotions, and make changes when they need to be made, which is essentially the same thing as follow your intuition. Like, if you're not happy in a situation, make the change to make the situation what you want it to be. And the longer that you go ignoring the changes that need to be made and not making them, then the more stressed you're going to be, the more out of whack your nervous system's going to get, the worse you're going to feel, and you're going to feel burnt out. And the magic pill to cure burnout is tune into your intuition. At that point that you're really feeling burnt out, it's probably not going to be very difficult. It's probably going to be very obvious, the change you need to make. I will say it'll be obvious and maybe not obvious at the same time, because when I was really burnt out at my job, like, I was so disconnected from my body at that point. I was very out of touch with my intuition, but obviously I knew the change I wanted to make was leave the job. I didn't have that relationship with my intuition at the time to kind of have the awareness around it, but I still knew what I needed to do, right? If you asked me while I was in that toxic relationship after I left my job, John Marie, why are you miserable? Why aren't you happy? I knew. I'd be like, oh, it's because my relationship sucks, like, even like earlier in my business, if you were like, John Marie, why do you feel burnt out, or what's wrong in your life? I'd be like, oh, I'm way too busy. I'm working way too much. Like, it's usually very obvious the change you need to make. And so, yeah, I basically just wanted to bring that perspective on burnout, or I guess the universe wanted to bring that perspective on burnout, because I don't know where that came from, but I feel like somebody needs to hear it. Feeling your feelings is literally like feeling your feelings plus listening to your intuition is basically the key to life. I mean, technically your intuition will always be guiding you to feel your feelings. So just listening to your intuition is basically the key to life. I'm a broken record with that. And really connecting to your body and understanding the body and learning how to work with your body and communicate with your body and deepening your connection, your communication with your body, understanding how to regulate your nervous system and how to speak the language of your body is so insanely powerful, and it's so underrated, and I'm so passionate about it, and I'm so happy that I'm doing this even more and more with myself and my own work with myself and with my clients. And I've been doing a ton of research about it. And yeah, like I said, I'm really looking into going even deeper with my education in it so that I can bring it even more into my work with clients and with myself, because it's so insanely powerful. Yeah, moral of the story, if you're feeling stressed or burnt out, there's a change you got to make. And I know the first thing that's going to probably come up when I say that is, but I can't make that change. And to that, I say, yes, you can. And you're basically just making an excuse, and go listen to the last podcast episode on taking personal responsibility for your life and your circumstances. Listen to episode number 5, where I basically remind you that nothing is serious and life is just a game of shiggles. Nothing matters, so just play and have fun, and life is literally whatever you make up that you want it to be. Listen to my story, because I went through all the things where I thought I couldn't make a change, and I could. You always can. Of course you can. You have the power. You got the power. You've got the power. Who's telling you can't make it? It's just you. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that's going to happen if you make this change? And what's the best that could happen? You have so much more to gain than you have to lose. And something my amazing coach said to me today, she reminded me, every loss is a gain, right? It's this or something better. It's only this or something better. It's only this or something better. Because remember, your intuition is the one guiding you to make the change. Your intuition's never going to be telling you to make a change that will lead to something worse. Never, ever, ever, ever. It may feel uncomfortable. That's where feeling your feelings comes in. If you feel that discomfort, then it won't feel uncomfortable anymore. So it's literally only possible for it to be this, or listen to the intuition, make the change that will lead to something better. Inevitably, guarantee. Those are the only 2 options. Also, I actually do want to mention, because when I'm saying like, just make the change, like you can make the change. Remember, I'm pretty sure I talked about this in a recent podcast episode. Remember the analogy I give of like not jumping across the room, right? So, when I'm like, you can do it, you can do it. I feel like for most people, especially since I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, like you may, especially in like burnout, the concept is very popular within like career. And it's like, well, I can't just leave my job. Like, I can't just quit my job. I'll have no money. And so I want to remind you that specifically when it comes to job, or, like I'm telling you that the change is going to be really obvious, that doesn't mean that the immediate change you're being called to make is like that biggest, like surface level, top big change. Like I was saying before, energy and intention and feeling your feelings, like the change might be like, you need to start giving yourself a little more loving compassion. Or like there are going to be baby step changes you can make in a way that you're able to make the change so that you're not like blowing out your nervous system even more. That's where tuning into intuition is just going to be so, so important. Because like in my circumstance, like when I got to this point of extreme quote unquote burnout, it was that I just needed to leave the job and I needed to leave the relationship. And it was like that big extreme change. And so you'll know intuitively if that's what you need to do. And a way you can really like ask yourself, like, is this what I need to do? Or is it a different change or a smaller change? Is like, will I feel more stressed after this or less, right? Like if leaving your job, that's going to create more stress because your nervous system doesn't have the capacity to like hold and like trust through that phase of like, well, where was my money coming from? And that's going to actually make you even more stressed. Like leaving your job with no plan is actually not what you need to do. But if leaving your job is going to serve your peace and create more peace and decrease your stress, because the stress of being at your job is greater than the stress and fear of like not necessarily knowing where your income is going to come from, or if you have like a savings, like nest egg or what's it called, a safety net, like if you have a source of income that will get you by. And so it's like, it's not creating more stress, like it's going to depend where you're at and what your capacity is for your nervous system. And a way you can tap into this is just connecting to your intuition, like, does that feel scary in like a free fall kind of way, like a roller coaster kind of way, like this is scary but exciting? Does it feel opening and expansive, or does it feel scary like, oh my God, like I'm walking down a dark alley, it like contracts you, it feels dark and tight? Another question you can ask is, will I feel proud of myself for making this decision? Like what change, like what choice or decision or action will make me proud of myself right now? Because especially when it comes to leaving your job or staying at your job, or is it the right time to leave my job? I should honestly just do a whole episode on like that. But it's really like, am I running away from something or am I running towards something? Like, is the fear telling me to stay or telling me to go? Because it could be either, and this can shift. Like, if the fear is telling you to stay at your job, then that is going to look like, I'm really being called to leave this job, but I'm afraid that I won't make enough money if I leave, or I won't find another job, or I'm afraid that I'll fail at my business or whatever. If the fear is telling you to go, that can look like, I need to leave this job because it's the only way I'll have enough time, or I need to leave this job because in that scenario, it's like the truth, the quote unquote truth, like that we're basing our decision off of is like, I don't have enough time, I'm in lack, and the job is really just like a scapegoat. But if it's like the truth that we're basing our decision off of is, I'm worth more than this, or I need to go all in on this dream or whatever it is, and the fear is telling us to stay, like that's another way you can discern. But it does come down to really just like, is this a full body yes in my body? It has to be a full body yes. And that's how you can really gauge like what level of change do I need to make. I'm kind of like slipping into like intuition hacks again. I always talk about like intuition hacks, how to know, because it can be difficult to translate just through podcast, because it can be so different for everyone, and there's never like any one size fits all answer to what your intuition is telling you to do. But since I'm basically saying like the solution to burnout is just listen to your intuition, I feel like I also want to make sure that you understand, like that you don't misunderstand me of what that like looks like to tune into your intuition and make the change that is actually aligned for you. One last thing I'll say on that is specifically again around like leaving or staying at a job is like, where do you feel the resistance? I feel like you're gonna feel resistance in both, but it's like I talk about the good resistance and the bad resistance, right? Like the good discomfort and the bad discomfort of like the discomfort and resistance you feel to working out, even though like you're gonna feel better after, versus the resistance and discomfort you feel to working out like when you're sick or you have a broken ankle, because you're gonna actually feel worse after. And like example for me is, for a long time, when I started my business, I was serving and I was like blaming my serving job. I was like resenting my serving job. I was like, oh, I need to leave this job. Like this job is taking away my freedom. I feel so trapped. Like I don't have enough time, And at that point in time, it was the fear telling me to leave the job, and I felt resistance towards going to the job, which is a sign that staying at the job is actually what I needed there. And it was actually an internal shift I needed to make, versus when I got to the point where it actually was the right time to leave my job, I actually felt resistance to leaving. And I was like, I don't want to lose the safety. Actually, like, I kind of want to stay. I'm going to miss it. And that was the sign, now it's the time to go. Because before I wanted to leave, and now like I don't want to, even though I did want to, but like when that part comes up telling you like, wait, don't, but, right? That's how you know like which way is intuition pulling me and which way is fear pulling me. So that's another way you can tell, because it's like the resistance actually shifted. It got to the point where I was like, actually, I know that this is what I am being called to, and now the fear is like, wait, don't go. When before it was like the other way around. So I hope that makes sense. So I just want to like preface that, because I think sometimes people can think like, okay, yeah, I just got to leave my job. That's not actually what's in alignment with them at that very moment. And that's not actually what their intuition is calling them to do. And then they just kind of get into even more stress. So just be conscious of that. Again, like the change normally, the change often could just start with these little shifts, of like, do I need to show up differently? Do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And that's where your intuition is so important, because I can only give so much advice without, really talking to you. Like I'll have someone come into a session and they'll be like, I'm just so burnt out, I have no time, or I just want to quit my job. And like, we have to kind of peel and be like, all right, what's underneath that? What's underneath that? What's underneath that? To get to like really what the intuitive soul desire is. And so, like depending on how connected you are to your intuition or not, like it's important to tap into intuition when it comes to what is the change I'm being called to make. And if you feel confused or like you don't know how to navigate it, that is where that's why I do these sessions, right? Like that's where getting a coach, a mentor, an outside perspective, specifically who knows how to navigate and how to get to the root of it, comes in. So I wanted to make sure that I preface that, because I hear people saying like, I can't. Like you're saying I can just quit my job. I can't just quit my job. And it's like, well, it depends, like if that is actually what's aligned for you right now or not, if that's the change your intuition is calling you to make. And I was just listening back to that section I recorded, and I was like, okay, I'm making this sound like, yes, it is that simple, but also there's nuance to it. And it's not always the surface level change that's the problem, if that makes sense. I'm just laughing because I have no idea where this came from. It feels so kind of random. I'm like, who needs to hear about burnout? Apparently someone. So I'm just going to trust it. This episode won't even be coming out until next week. So yeah, we'll just see. We'll just see. I'd love to know. Are you burnt out? Or do you just need to feel some feelings and then make a change? That might be difficult and uncomfortable. Or are you in alignment and listening to your intuition? And you're like, burnout? Who's that? Don't know her. New phone, who dis? Don't got burnout in my contacts anymore. Not available for that anymore because I know how to listen to my intuition. Where are you at? And also I want to say too, no one is immune to, like, no one is listening to their intuition perfectly all the time. I'm definitely not. Nobody is. We're all human. And like I always say, I've said this many times on the podcast already, it's a process. I talked about like when you're ready, you're ready. I will say over and over, I needed at that time to be in those situations for as long as I was. And I needed those long periods of misalignment to really, that's what I needed for this lesson to integrate. But again, if this is landing for you and resonating right now in this moment, then maybe you are ready to make the change, and maybe this is the sign that you needed. And I really feel like it's going to be, because it wouldn't have just dropped in out of nowhere if it wasn't. So thank you so much for listening. Love to know what you think about the podcast episode. If you know anybody that is feeling burnt out that you think this may benefit, send it on their way. If you thought the episode was valuable or someone else might get something out of it, take a screenshot, share it on your stories, tag me, spread the love. Leave a rate or review if you haven't already. Send me a DM. Let me know what you thought. I love you so, so much. Don't forget to stop and take a deep breath. Smile. Have a great rest of your day or night wherever you are. And I will talk to you next week. Bye.